The Galactic Defense Summit had long been an event of great reverence. Once every 10 cycles, the most powerful and technologically advanced species in the galaxy gathered on Velidor Prime, a planet known for its unyielding neutrality and fortified security. Velidor Prime's surface, covered with silvery mountains and sprawling cities, was home to the Galactic Citadel, a structure so large that its spires could be seen from space. The Galactic Citadel was where military generals, scientists, and political leaders from across the galaxy convened to discuss issues of defense, security, and the safeguarding of their territories. The summit had become a symbol of power and deterrence. For millions of years, it stood as a reminder of the delicate balance maintained between the many races that called the galaxy home. Here, on this neutral ground, conflicts could be avoided through displays of strength, diplomacy, and the unveiling of the most advanced weapons of mass destruction. On this cycle's agenda was the unveiling of the galactic superweapon, an orbital cannon capable of disintegrating an entire planet with a single pulse of energy. The anticipation was palpable, with alien generals arriving days before the summit to inspect the superweapon. This cannon was unlike anything seen before, created by the Ruvi Ike, a race of technological savants whose mechanical advancements had put them far ahead of most civilizations. The cannon had been heralded as the pinnacle of destruction, a weapon that could maintain peace through fear of annihilation. The Galactic Citadel buzzed with activity as thousands of dignitaries and military officials from all over the galaxy prepared for the grand unveiling. Different species, in various shapes, colors, and forms, converged in the grand halls of the Citadel. The tall and regal Chthonian generals, their elongated faces framed by silver helmets, walked alongside the reptilian Ra-Ka, whose scaled armor clinked with every step. The Avrith, with their feathered wings folded gracefully behind them, communicated silently in their bird-like clicks and whistles as they floated above the ground. Among these esteemed guests was Earth's delegation. The humans had only recently been accepted into the summit, having developed faster than light travel less than a century ago. Despite their relatively recent arrival to the galactic stage, humans had quickly gained a reputation for their adaptability, tenacity, and unconventional problem-solving. But to the established species at the summit, the humans were still viewed with a certain level of skepticism. Their military capabilities, though improving, were seen as far inferior to the likes of the technologically superior Ruvi-Eek or the militaristic Valathar. The human delegation arrived late to the event, as was their custom. Leading the group was Commander Sarah Blake, an unassuming figure dressed in the Earth Defense Force's formal uniform. She was accompanied by a handful of scientists and tactical advisors, all of whom looked curiously out of place amongst the sea of extraterrestrial military might. Blake had been briefed on the summit's purpose, but couldn't help but feel a bit out of place. She knew Earth was the underdog in this gathering of galactic powers. As the humans disembarked from their transport, they were met with side glances and mutters of discontent from the more established races. To the other species, the humans' lack of formality, combined with their delayed arrival, was almost an insult. The Ra-Ka commander, General V-Rak, hissed audibly as the humans walked by. His scaled visage, with its 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession, conveyed disdain. Late as usual, V-Rak sneered in his native tongue, the translation echoing through the communication bands worn by the summit's participants. "They think they can keep up with us, yet they can't even arrive on time," whispered General Kale of the Chthonian fleet, his elongated fingers tightening around the ceremonial staff he carried. Blake ignored the comments. Earth was not here to impress or intimidate, they were here to observe, learn, and, most importantly, keep a low profile. The humans had no intention of showcasing their military prowess today. After all, they had none to compare with the grandeur of what was to be presented. As they made their way to the Grand Hall, a massive structure with towering walls that seemed to reach the very stars, the human delegation noticed the enormous display being prepared. In the center of the hall stood the galactic superweapon, a structure that, even when dormant, radiated an aura of immense power. It was sleek and metallic, its surface gleaming with advanced alloys not yet known to human science. Around it, engineers and scientists from the RUVK worked diligently, making final preparations for the weapon's demonstration. The Grand Hall was a cacophony of alien voices, each species discussing the weapon with a mixture of awe and fear. Holographic screens hovered in midair, displaying technical schematics of the weapon, its capabilities, and the destruction it could cause. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Blake's team stood at the edge of the room, their eyes glued to the weapon. While the humans were here to observe, the gravity of the situation wasn't lost on them. This was a weapon capable of wiping out entire planets an unimaginable level of destruction. They had known about the superweapon through intelligence reports, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. "Commander, this thing is..." One of her advisors, Dr. Harold Grant, began, his voice trailing off as he struggled to find the words. "It's terrifying." Blake nodded, her face stern. "That's the point. But we're not here to be scared. We're here to understand." As the final preparations were made, a hush fell over the room. The RUVK delegation stepped forward, led by High Chancellor K. Rath, a being who seemed to be more machine than flesh. His silver skin gleamed under the lights of the Grand Hall, his mechanical eyes scanning the crowd. His voice, when it came, was deep and resonant, amplified by the thousands of translation devices worn by the attendees. "Welcome, esteemed generals and leaders of the galaxy," K. Rath began, his tone filled with a mechanical precision that sent chills down the spines of many present. "Today we present to you the pinnacle of technological advancement. The galactic superweapon, a device of such immense power that it will ensure peace throughout the galaxy for millennia to come." There were murmurs of approval from the crowd. The concept of peace through superior firepower was not new, but this weapon took that idea to a new level. As K. Rath continued his speech, detailing the weapon's capabilities, Blake noticed the reactions of the other generals. They were impressed, certainly, but there was also something else: fear. Fear that such power could be wielded by one race, fear that it could be turned on them. "Today we shall demonstrate this weapon's power," K. Rath said, gesturing to the engineers around him. "A planet, devoid of life, has been selected for destruction. You shall witness firsthand the might of the galactic superweapon." The lights in the hall dimmed, and a holographic projection of a distant, uninhabited planet appeared above the weapon. It was a barren, rocky world, its surface marred by craters and mountains. A perfect target. The engineers began their work, activating the weapon. The room was silent, save for the hum of the superweapon powering up. Lights flickered along its surface, and a low, resonant vibration could be felt beneath the feet of the attendees. Blake exchanged glances with her team. This was the moment they had been waiting for. This was the reason Earth had come to witness the ultimate display of galactic power. But as the superweapon neared full charge, something unexpected happened. Blake's team had brought with them a small device, something harmless, or so they thought. It was a prototype for a new form of fireworks, designed for Earth's upcoming celebrations of a century of galactic exploration. The humans had planned to show it off during the more informal parts of the summit, but through a series of miscommunications, the device was accidentally synced with the galactic superweapon. And in that moment, instead of a destructive pulse of energy, the superweapon launched a series of dazzling, colorful fireworks into the sky. The entire hall was thrown into confusion. The grand display of destruction was replaced by bursts of red, blue, and green light, accompanied by the unmistakable crackle of fireworks. The alien generals, who had been preparing to witness the obliteration of a planet, now stood in stunned silence, their faces lit by the unexpected light show. Blake's team looked on in horror, realizing what had happened. But before they could react, the humans in the hall began to cheer. The vibrant explosions of color continued to ripple across the holographic sky, lighting up the galactic citadel in hues of red, blue, green, and gold. The stark contrast between the delicate beauty of the fireworks and the cold, metallic interior of the citadel only heightened the surreal nature of what was happening. The firework bursts reflected off the polished surfaces of the galactic superweapon, casting erratic shadows that danced across the stunned faces of the assembled military leaders. The Ra-Ka general, Vrak, stood frozen, his four eyes wide and his mouth slightly open, displaying rows of sharp, serrated teeth. His clawed hands twitched involuntarily, as if trying to grasp the reality of what he was seeing. For a split second, the possibility of sabotage crossed his mind. This couldn't be happening with someone tampering with the galactic superweapon. His eyes darted towards the Ruvik engineers who had been operating the weapon, but they appeared as confused as he was, frantically checking their control panels and interfaces. The Kulthonian general, KL, a being of immense stature with an elongated face framed by the silver bands of his ceremonial helmet, narrowed his eyes in suspicion. His long fingers tightened around the staff he carried, a symbol of Kulthonian authority, as if expecting an imminent threat. His species was known for their calm, calculated approach to war, yet the disarray of the situation tugged at the edges of his composure. Kale's dark eyes, usually filled with cold confidence, were now flickering with unease. All around the hall, the reactions were similar: shock, disbelief, and confusion. The Avrith, the bird-like species with wings adorned in iridescent feathers, hovered above the ground, clicking and whistling in nervous excitement. Their feathered bodies trembled as they exchanged rapid bursts of communication, trying to make sense of the event. The Avrith, who valued precision and discipline, were among the first to assume that something had gone terribly wrong with the weapon. Even the Ruvik themselves, creators of the galactic superweapon, and considered the foremost technological minds in the galaxy, were visibly unsettled. Chancellor K. Rath, his cybernetic body gleaming in the multicolored light of the fireworks, turned sharply toward his engineers, his mechanical voice laced with tension. "Explain this," he demanded, the robotic tone of his voice unable to mask his rising frustration. The engineers scrambled at their consoles, their synthetic fingers tapping furiously as they attempted to regain control of the weapon. Holographic screens flickered and blinked, showing schematics of the cannon's internal systems, but no answers were forthcoming. The Ruvik were perfectionists in their craft, and the fact that their greatest creation had seemingly malfunctioned in such an absurd manner was a blow to their pride. As the fireworks continued to burst and crackle, the human delegation watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. Commander Sarah Blake stood at the back of the hall, her face a perfect mask of calm, though inside she was reeling. She exchanged a quick glance with Dr. Grant, whose face had gone pale as he stared at the display. "This is bad," Grant whispered, his voice barely audible above the crackling of the fireworks. "This is really, really bad." Blake nodded, her mind racing. She knew that this wasn't just a simple mistake. The galactic superweapon was a symbol of power and dominance, and now, in front of the most important military leaders in the galaxy, it was behaving like a children's toy. She could almost feel the collective judgment of the alien races in the room, as if they were already attributing this disaster to human interference. "We need to fix this," Blake muttered under her breath. But before they could make a move, something unexpected happened. The fireworks, which had been launched accidentally by the humans, began to take on a life of their own. With each successive burst, the display grew more elaborate. Streams of multicolored light spiraled into intricate patterns, forming symbols, shapes, and even figures that danced across the sky above the citadel. The shapes of planets, stars, and galaxies unfurled in dazzling displays of light. Some of the fireworks took the form of animals from different worlds: a massive scaled beast that roared across the sky, a majestic winged creature that soared through the stars. The awe of the crowd, previously steeped in confusion, began to shift to something else: curiosity. One of the Valathar generals, a tall, fearsome warrior clad in crimson armor, turned his head slowly to his companion. "This is intentional?" The question hung in the air, carried by a growing sense of unease. Was this some kind of human trick? Had Earth's delegation, known for their unorthodox methods, planned this all along? Or was this some advanced, playful mockery human technology manipulating the galaxy's most feared weapon with ease? For a moment, the crowd collectively held its breath. At that moment, Blake stepped forward. She knew she had to act quickly, or risk having Earth blamed for what could be seen as a mockery of the summit. She wasn't sure how this had happened, but she had to own it. With a confidence she wasn't sure she felt, she approached the center of the room, all eyes falling on her as she did so. The generals, though still shocked, began to turn their attention to Blake. Her calm approach gave them pause. Perhaps this had been planned after all. Kale, still clutching his staff, spoke first. "Commander Blake," he said, his deep voice cutting through the noise, "what is the meaning of this?" Blake smiled a tight, controlled smile. "We call it fireworks," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's a form of celebration on Earth." "Celebration?" Virak hissed, his scaled face twisted in disbelief. "This is a weapon of destruction, not a toy for children." Blake knew she was treading dangerous ground. If she misstepped, the humans would be blamed for undermining the summit, and worse, they could be seen as a threat. But something inside her told her to push forward, to own the moment. She had seen this kind of situation before, humans making mistakes in front of powerful alien races, only to turn it into an advantage through creativity and charm. "Yes," Blake said, "it's a weapon. But we believe in creativity and finding beauty in all things. This is how we celebrate the advancement of technology, by showing that even the most powerful weapons can create something beautiful." The hall was silent for a moment, the fireworks still bursting above them. Blake could feel the weight of the stares from the generals, the suspicion in their eyes. She knew they weren't convinced yet. But then, something remarkable happened. One of the holographic fireworks, a massive, glowing image of a distant star, burst into an array of tiny lights, forming the shape of an ancient Raka beast. The lights shimmered and danced, and for a moment the entire room was captivated by its beauty. Even Virak, who had been moments away from condemning the humans, watched in quiet awe as the creature moved gracefully through the stars. The room began to shift. Whispers replaced silence, and the tension in the air began to ease. Some of the more curious species, including the Avrith, began clicking in approval, their feathers rustling as they exchanged notes on the unexpected display. "It's beautiful," murmured one of the Avrith leaders, her voice soft and musical. Blake felt a wave of relief wash over her. They weren't out of the woods yet, but she could see the change in the room. The initial shock was beginning to fade, replaced by a cautious curiosity. If she could play this right, if she could continue to turn the situation to their advantage, the humans might just walk out of this unscathed. "I understand this wasn't what you expected," Blake said, her voice carrying across the room. "But perhaps it's a reminder that we can find new uses for old tools. The galactic superweapon is a symbol of power, yes. But imagine if we could find ways to wield that power, not just for destruction, but for creation." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, the generals were silent again, contemplating the implications. Of course, not everyone was convinced. General Kale, ever the traditionalist, stepped forward, his towering figure casting a long shadow over Blake. "And what," he said, his voice cold, "do you propose we do with this beauty you have created? You expect us to believe that your primitive fireworks are a better use of this weapon than planetary defense?" Blake didn't flinch. She had prepared for this. "I'm not saying we replace the weapon's purpose entirely, but we could explore additional application celebrations, peaceful displays, demonstrations of power that don't require the destruction of a world. It's a chance to show strength through creativity." Vrak let out a low growl, his claws scraping the floor. "This is nonsense. We have no need for your human tricks." But before Blake could respond, something unexpected happened again. The Ruv-Eek Chancellor, K. Rath, who had been silent throughout most of the exchange, raised his hand to quiet the room. His cybernetic eyes glinted as they focused on Blake. "The humans," K. Rath said, his voice slow and deliberate, "have shown us something we did not expect. It is true that this is not what we came for, but perhaps there is something to be learned from this. Technology, even at its most destructive, has the potential for dual purposes. It is worth exploring." The room was silent once more. K. Rath's words carried immense weight, and the other generals looked to him for guidance. Blake could feel her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the moment of decision. Kale, though clearly displeased, bowed his head slightly in deference to K. Rath. "If the Chancellor believes it is worth exploring," he said, his tone clipped, "then we shall discuss it." Vrak hissed but remained silent. The other generals, sensing the shift in the room, began to nod in agreement. The humans, it seemed, had narrowly avoided disaster. Blake exhaled, her shoulders relaxing slightly. They had done it. Through a strange combination of luck, creativity, and quick thinking, the humans had turned a potential catastrophe into a moment of curiosity and exploration. It wasn't a perfect victory, but it was enough. As the fireworks continued to light up the sky, Blake stepped back to her team, who were still wide-eyed with shock. How did we pull that off?" Dr. Grant asked, his voice trembling slightly. Blake smiled, though it was a tired smile. "Humans are full of surprises," she said softly. "Even to ourselves."